What if I told you that most people fail to get rich? Not because they're lazy, not because they lack talent, but because they follow the wrong money rules. Imagine working hard your whole life, and at the end, realizing you've been climbing the wrong ladder. You get to the top, look around, and there's nothing there but bills, stress, and the quiet regret that whispers, you could have done it differently. Rohn, a man who went from broke, in debt, and working at a department store, to becoming one of the most influential mentors in the world, didn't just get lucky. He discovered 5 money rules so powerful, they transformed his life forever. And here's the truth. These rules don't care who you are, where you start, or how much you have right now. If you follow them, they can change everything. But here's the catch. I'm not going to just list them for you like some boring PowerPoint. We're going to walk through them step by step, building towards the rule that Jim himself considered the most important of all, the one that made all the others work. Miss it, and nothing else will matter. Stay until the end, and you'll walk away with a money blueprint you can use today, right now, to rewrite your financial future. So ask yourself, are you ready to hear the rules that could turn the rest of your life into the best of your life? Or will you click away and let another year pass, wondering why nothing changes? Before we dive in, do yourself a favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what you're about to hear may be the most useful video you've ever seen. Rule 1. Live below your means, but expand your means over time. Rohn used to say, if you spend everything you make, you'll always be broke, no matter how much you earn. Simple, right? But here's the twist. He didn't just mean cutting costs and living like a monk forever. He meant starting lean, and then growing your means until you could afford the life you truly wanted. Without debt, without panic, without being chained to your paycheck. Now, I want you to imagine this. You're at a party, the music's loud, the food is amazing, and people are showing off. Expensive watches, luxury cars parked outside, designer clothes. You see one guy, quiet, not flashy, nothing about him screams wealthy. But 10 years later, guess what? That's the guy who owns 3 properties, runs a thriving business, and vacations anywhere he wants. And all those big spenders from the party, they're still stuck in the same job, stressed about money. Why? Because he followed the first rule. Jim's story starts in the late 1950s. He was 25 years old, broke, married with a baby, and deep in debt. One day, a friend invited him to a seminar. Jim almost didn't go. He thought, I can't afford it. But that friend told him, you can't afford not to go. So Jim scraped together the ticket money, went, and heard his mentor Rohn say something that changed everything. Don't buy luxuries until you can afford them twice. That was the moment Jim realized his problem wasn't just low income. It was that his spending had no discipline. If a new TV came out, he bought it on credit. If his friends went to a nice restaurant, he went to, even if it meant overdrafting his account. Sound familiar? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people live at or above their means, and they call it enjoying life. But what they're really doing is trading their future freedom for today's fleeting comfort. Let's make this practical. I want you to take a hard look at your last 30 days of spending. Not the big obvious stuff, the rent, the bills, but the little things, the morning coffee, the delivery apps, the just one more subscriptions you forgot you had. Add it up. You'll be shocked. And here's the challenge. Cut 20% from that number starting this month. Not to punish yourself, but to create space. Because you can't invest, you can't build wealth, without breathing room. Jim used to put it like this. The first goal is not to increase your income. It's to control your outgo. He'd save at least 30% of every paycheck, no matter how small it was, and live on the rest. That habit, before he had big money, built the muscle that allowed him to handle big money later without blowing it. But here's where most people go wrong. They hear live below your means and they think it's a life sentence. They think it means no fun, no freedom, no joy. That's not the rule. The real rule is, live below your means for now, so you can expand your means for the future. Think of it like a slingshot. When you pull back, when you hold off on spending, when you create that extra gap between what you earn and what you spend, you're building tension. And when you release it into the right investments, skills, and opportunities, you launch forward faster than you ever thought possible. Here's an example. One of Jim's early students made $1,500 a month. He cut his expenses to $1,200 and used the $300 gap to invest in books, courses, and eventually a small business. Within 5 years, that same guy was making $15,000 a month. Did he stay in the same apartment forever? No. Did he drive the same beat-up car forever? No. But he earned his upgrades. They didn't own him. Now let's make this real for you. Ask yourself, if I cut my spending by 20%, where could that money go that would grow? Could it go into paying off debt faster? Into a course to learn a high-income skill? Into a side hustle that might double your income in the next year? If you can answer that question and then actually act on it, you're already ahead of 90% of people. And here's the mental shift that locks this rule in. Stop trying to impress people who don't pay your bills. Jim said it best. We buy things we don't need, with money we don't have, to impress people we don't like. The moment you stop doing that, you win. So here's your takeaway for Rule 1. Start with discipline before dollars. Cut the excess, build the gap, and then, don't just let that extra money sit. Aim it like a weapon at your future. That's how you go from surviving to thriving. Remember, this is only the first rule. The next one, it's the one that takes that gap you've created and turns it into real, unstoppable wealth. And if you think investing is just for rich people, you're about to see why that's one of the biggest lies keeping people broke. Rule 2. Invest before you spend. Rohn had a radical way of thinking about money that most people still get backwards today. The average person earns money, pays their bills, spends what they want, and then, if there's anything left, they think about investing. Jim flipped it. He invested first, and then spent what was left. Now, you might think, that's impossible. I barely have enough to pay my bills now. And that's exactly why this rule works. It forces you to prioritize building wealth before you prioritize consuming it. Picture this. It's the early 1960s. Jim is making just a little more than enough to get by, but every time he got paid, he would immediately put a portion aside into investments before touching a single dollar for groceries, gas, or fun. Some months, that meant he had to get creative. Instead of going out for dinner, he'd invite friends over for coffee. Instead of buying a new suit, he'd keep wearing the same one. He didn't see it as sacrifice. He saw it as strategy. Because here's what most people don't realize. Money you invest today has the power to work for you every single day of your life. Even while you sleep, even while you're sick, even while you're on vacation. Money you spend today, it's gone the moment it leaves your hand. Let's break this down simply. Imagine you make $2,000 a month. You decide that 10%, $200, will be invested no matter what. That's $200 that will start building your future. You treat it like a non-negotiable bill, just like rent or electricity. Because here's the thing, your landlord won't let you skip rent because you needed a new phone. The same discipline should apply to your investments. And don't overcomplicate it. Jim wasn't born a Wall Street genius. He started with simple, understandable things, buying shares in companies he believed in, real estate he could see and touch, and eventually, his own business ventures. The point wasn't to guess the next big thing. The point was to start. But here's where the tension really builds. If you only invest when it's comfortable, you'll never do it. Comfort comes after you start, not before. That's why so many people stay stuck in a paycheck-to-paycheck loop for decades. They're waiting for the right time to invest. Newsflash, the right time doesn't come. You create it. Let me tell you a quick story. One of Jim's students was a young teacher making a modest salary. She followed his advice, invest first, live on the rest. At first, her friends thought she was crazy. They went on vacations, bought new cars, went out every weekend, and she stayed home some nights, drove an old car, and kept her costs low. Fast forward 10 years, she had enough passive income from her investments to quit teaching if she wanted to. Her friends, still working, still stressed, still wishing they had started earlier. That's the brutal truth. Investing isn't about being smart with money. It's about being smart with time. Every dollar you invest early has decades to grow. Wait until you're ready, and you lose the one thing you can't buy back: years of compounding. Here's a practical challenge. Before you watch your next Netflix show, set up an automatic transfer from your checking account to an investment account. One that happens every single month, right after you get paid. Start small if you have to. Even $50 a month is better than zero, because you're building the habit. Once the habit is in place, increasing the amount becomes second nature. Now, maybe you're thinking, but what if I lose money? Jim had an answer for that too. It's not the money you lose that destroys you. It's the opportunity you never take. The truth is, yes, some investments will fail, but if you diversify, learn, and keep going, the wins will far outweigh the losses. And here's the magic. When you invest first, your entire mindset shifts. You stop thinking like a consumer, and you start thinking like an owner. You start noticing how businesses run, how markets move, how value is created. You begin to see opportunities everywhere, because your money is working for you, and that changes you. The next time you get paid, I want you to do this. Imagine your money as a group of employees. If you spend it, you're firing them the moment they arrive. If you invest it, you're putting them to work, earning you more employees in the future. And the more employees you have working for you, the less you have to work yourself. Jim summed it up perfectly. Don't get caught in the trap of living to pay bills. Live to build assets that will pay you. Rule 2 is simple to say, hard to do, but life-changing when you commit to it. Invest before you spend. Even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable, because in the next rule, we're going to talk about how to protect and multiply those investments, so they don't just grow slowly, but explode in value over time. And that's where most people either win big or lose everything. Rule 3. Multiply what you already have. If the first 2 rules were about creating the habit of saving and investing, this one is about turning that spark into a raging fire. Rohn believed that once you had money working for you, the next step wasn't to let it sit quietly in the corner. It was to teach it how to bring back friends. In other words, multiplication. And here's where most people fail. They think, I've got some investments, I'll just let them sit. That's fine. But that's not what made Jim wealthy. He didn't stop at growth. He looked for acceleration. The difference between adding and multiplying is the difference between a campfire and a forest fire. One keeps you warm for the night. The other changes the entire landscape. Let me paint you a picture. It's the late 1960s. Jim has already been practicing his invest first habit for years. He's got some money working in modest investments, small business shares, real estate, a few safe plays. But then he notices something. Each dollar that earns him a return could be reinvested into something with a higher return, something with more potential, something that could compound faster. Think of it like planting trees. The average person plants 1 tree, waters it, and waits years for fruit. Jim, he planted 10, and every time one grew fruit, he took the seeds and planted 10 more. One of his favorite examples was reinvesting business profits into more businesses. Imagine you run a small shop that makes you $1,000 in profit a month. Most people would take that and upgrade their lifestyle. A better car, a nicer phone, dinner's out. Jim would take that $1,000 and either expand the shop, buy into another business, or put it into an asset that could pay him again. Here's the magic formula he used. Profit gives reinvest gives expand gives repeat. Sounds simple, but here's the catch. It requires discipline and patience. Multiplication isn't flashy in the beginning. It's boring. It's years of putting your returns back into the game instead of cashing them out. But then, suddenly, you hit a tipping point where the returns from your returns start producing more than you ever could by working alone. Let's make it real with a story. Jim once mentored a man who started with a single vending machine. He followed Jim's advice. Every dollar in profit went into buying more vending machines. For the first year, he barely saw any change in his lifestyle. He was still driving the same beat-up car, still wearing the same clothes. By year 3, he owned 20 machines. By year 5, over 100. His income exploded, all because he didn't take the profits and spend them. He multiplied them. Here's the hard truth most people don't like. Multiplication means saying no to instant gratification over and over again. It's turning down the vacation now so you can buy the beachfront property later. It's skipping the latest gadget so you can own the company that makes it. And you don't have to start big. Jim used to say, it's not the amount, it's the mentality. If you make $50 profit from a side hustle, don't think, it's just $50. Think, this 50 can turn into 500, then 5,000, if I keep it moving. Now, let's talk about how to multiply. Jim had 3 main levers. First, reinvesting in the same asset. Doubling down on what's already working. If you own a rental property that's cash flowing, save up and buy another. If your online store is making money, add more products, expand your marketing, hire help to scale faster. Second, diversifying into connected opportunities. Jim didn't just buy random investments, he looked for assets that complemented each other. Own a restaurant, invest in a local farm that supplies fresh produce, have a consulting business, invest in software that makes your work faster. This creates a network of assets that support each other. Third, leveraging other people's skills and money. Jim wasn't afraid to partner up. If he didn't know something, he'd find someone who did and offer them a stake. If he didn't have enough capital for a deal, he'd bring in investors. Multiplication happens faster when you're not the only one pushing the wheel. Here's where the story gets even more intense. In one of Jim's talks, he told the audience about a decision that changed everything for him. He had a comfortable portfolio, enough that he could have stopped working hard and coasted. But instead, he took a big portion of his returns and put them into a new venture that scared him. It was risky, outside his comfort zone, and the people around him said he was crazy. It paid off. That one investment multiplied his wealth faster than the previous 5 years combined. Why? Because multiplication rewards courage, but only when it's backed by wisdom, research, and discipline. And this is where I need you to think hard. Look at your life right now. Do you have any orphan profits? Little bits of money that are just sitting there, doing nothing? What if, instead of letting them gather dust, you put them into something that could multiply? It doesn't have to be huge, but it has to be intentional. Jim used to say, you can't just hope for more money. You have to train your money to work over time. That's what multiplication is, training your money to bring in more money, without you lifting a finger. Let me leave you with this thought. In the beginning, your money works for you like a part-time intern. Slow, inexperienced, awkward. But if you keep investing and reinvesting, one day that intern becomes a manager, then a director, then the CEO of your financial life. And you get to step back and watch it run. Because the next rule we're going to cover takes this to the next level. It's not just about multiplying money, it's about protecting it so no matter what happens in the market, economy, or even your personal life, your wealth keeps working. That's where the real game begins. Rule 4. Protect what you build. Jim Rohn had a saying, getting rich is hard. Staying rich is a whole other game. And if you've ever watched someone win big and then lose it all, you know he was right. This rule isn't about making more. It's about building walls around what you've already created so no storm, market crash, or bad decision can tear it down overnight. Because here's the ugly truth. If you don't protect your wealth, someone else will gladly take it from you. Sometimes it's the taxman. Sometimes it's the market. Sometimes it's your own impulses. Jim saw this happen over and over again. A young entrepreneur makes their first 6 figures, then blows it all on flashy cars, bad partnerships, or unresearched investments. In 2 years, they're back where they started, or worse, in debt. Why? Because they thought earning money was the final step. It's not. It's just the halfway mark. Let me take you back to one of Jim's personal stories. In the mid-70s, after he had already achieved significant success, he was approached with a can't-miss deal. A friend of a friend had an opportunity in overseas real estate project that was guaranteed to double in a year. The pitch was perfect. Exotic location, exclusive access, big names involved. Jim said no. Not because he didn't believe in big opportunities, but because the risk-to-reward ratio didn't make sense for where he was financially. His reasoning was simple. Never risk a stable foundation for a maybe. That decision saved him a fortune. The project collapsed within 18 months. People lost everything. Jim, he kept building. So how do you protect your wealth like Jim did? He had 3 core strategies. First, insurance, but not just the boring kind. Jim didn't just buy life and health insurance. He insured his businesses, his key employees, his investments. If something happened to a crucial part of his operation, there was a financial safety net. This isn't exciting to talk about, but wealth protection often happens in the shadows, in the details nobody brags about on social media. Second, diversification as a shield, not just a growth tool. Earlier, we talked about multiplying money. Part of multiplication involves putting profits into different baskets. But here's the subtle difference. When you diversify for protection, you're not chasing the highest return, you're building a mix that keeps you safe when things go wrong. Real estate plus stocks plus cash reserves plus maybe a little gold. If one market tanks, the others keep you afloat. Third, protecting yourself from yourself. This might be the hardest part. We are all our own worst enemy when money starts flowing in. Jim trained himself to delay gratification even when he could afford something. He built a habit of asking, Will this decision make me richer or poorer a year from now? And if the answer was poorer, he passed. Let me give you a sharp example. One of Jim's mentees was a brilliant salesman who went from broke to making $200,000 a year within 3 years. But the moment he hit that income, he upgraded his life to match. Huge mortgage, luxury cars, expensive clothes. On paper, he looked rich. In reality, he was living paycheck to paycheck. Then, when his industry took a hit, he lost almost everything. Contrast that with another mentee who took the same earnings and built a 6-month emergency fund, diversified into rental properties, and kept his personal expenses modest. When the same downturn came, he didn't just survive, he bought more properties at a discount while everyone else was selling. That's what protecting wealth looks like. It's not passive, it's aggressive defense. Jim also believed in what he called fortress mindset. This wasn't about fear. It was about creating a position so secure that you could take calculated risks without risking your foundation. Imagine a medieval castle. Tall walls, deep moat, strong gates. Inside, you store your treasure. Outside, you might send knights on adventures. But no matter what happens out there, your core remains untouched. One of the most practical ways Jim taught this was the Never Touch Fund. This was a portion of his wealth that was never, under any circumstances, put into risky ventures. It wasn't for buying luxuries, it wasn't for experiments, it was the sacred pile. He treated it like the oxygen mask on a plane. You don't use it for fun, you use it to survive. He also talked about protecting wealth from erosion. This meant minimizing unnecessary taxes, avoiding bad debt, and keeping an eye on fees. People often ignore the small leaks, high-interest loans, annual maintenance costs on unused assets, or hidden investment fees. Jim said, a leaky boat doesn't sink because of one big hole. It sinks because you ignore the little ones. Now, I want to hit you with a reality check. Protecting wealth is boring, and that's exactly why most people don't do it. It doesn't give you the dopamine hit of buying something shiny. It doesn't impress strangers. But in 5, 10, 20 years, it's the difference between being financially free or starting over at 50. And I'll tell you one last thing. Protecting wealth also protects your mind. When you know you have a solid foundation, you make better decisions. You're not desperate, you're not reactive, you're not chasing quick fixes. You can think long-term. Jim's students to embrace this rule often ended up wealthier than the naturally risk-taking ones, simply because they never had to rebuild from scratch. They could keep compounding. So if you take one thing from this, remember, it's not just about making the money, it's about keeping it. If you lose it once, you can blame the market. If you lose it twice, you can blame bad luck. But if you keep losing it, the problem isn't the economy, it's your strategy. And that brings us to the 5th and final rule Jim lived by. The one that ties everything together and turns money into more than just a number in the bank. It turns it into a legacy. Rule 5. Teach it, share it, pass it on. If the first 4 rules are about making money, keeping money, and growing money, this last rule is about giving your wealth, and the wisdom behind it, a purpose. Rohn used to say, if you help enough people get what they want, you will get what you want. But there's a deeper layer here. Once you've mastered earning and protecting wealth, the game changes. It's no longer about how much you can make for yourself. It's about how much of a difference you can make for others. Here's the secret Jim discovered. The more you share your knowledge and lift others, the stronger your own position becomes. It's not just about morality. It's about leverage. By teaching, you create networks. By mentoring, you create allies. And by giving, you invite opportunities back into your life in ways you could never have predicted. I'll tell you a story that still gives me chills. In the late 1970s, Jim had already achieved financial independence. He could have easily retired to a quiet life. Instead, he began traveling the country, giving seminars and mentoring young entrepreneurs, often for very little pay in the beginning. Why? Because he believed wealth without impact was hollow. One of those young entrepreneurs was a struggling motivational speaker named Tony Robbins. Jim took him under his wing, shared not just sales strategies, but philosophies on life, discipline, and money. Tony took those lessons, built a global empire, and, here's the kicker, kept Jim's name alive for decades after. That single act of mentorship multiplied Jim's influence, income, and legacy far beyond what he could have achieved alone. So how do you live this rule in your own life? Jim broke it into 3 parts. First, teach what you've learned. even if you think you're not ready. Most people wait until they feel like they've mastered a subject to share it. But teaching is one of the fastest ways to deepen your own understanding. Jim would often say, you don't need to be a millionaire to teach people about money. You just need to be one step ahead of where they are now. That means if you've paid off debt, you can help someone still struggling with it. If you've learned to budget, you can guide someone who's never tracked a dollar in their life. Second, turn generosity into a habit, not an event. This isn't about giving away all your money. It's about weaving generosity into your lifestyle. Jim practiced what he called strategic generosity, giving in ways that created long-term ripple effects. That might mean funding a scholarship, helping someone start their business, or donating to a cause that aligns with your values. The key is to give in ways that empower, not enable. Third, think in terms of legacy. Money can disappear. Economies shift, but ideas, values, and principles, those can outlast you by generations if you pass them on intentionally. Jim documented his philosophies in books, recorded his speeches, and built systems so his ideas would live on. That's why we're still talking about him decades after his passing. He wasn't just wealthy. He was immortal in the sense that his teachings keep producing wealth for others. Let me give you a vivid example of how this plays out. A friend of mine, inspired by Jim's philosophy, decided to start a mentorship group for local teenagers in his city. He taught them basic financial skills, budgeting, saving, investing. At first, it was just a side project. 10 years later, several of those teenagers had started successful businesses, bought homes, and even begun mentoring others. The ripple effect was exponential. One man's chose to share turned into an entire ecosystem of empowered young adults. Now, here's the psychological twist. When you teach others, you also reinforce your own discipline. You can't preach saving if you're spending recklessly. You can't tell someone to invest for the long term if you're chasing every get-rich-quick scheme. Teaching holds you accountable. It forces you to live your values. Jim used to challenge his audiences with a question: if you died tomorrow, what would happen to all the knowledge you've collected? Would it vanish with you, or would it keep working, producing, multiplying through the lives of others? That's a heavy thought, but it's the core of this rule. And let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, some people will take what you give and waste it. Jim knew that, but he also knew you can't control every outcome. The point isn't to make sure every seed grows, it's to plant enough seeds that a forest emerges over time. Here's another reason this rule is so powerful. It attracts high-level relationships. When people see you as someone who uplifts others, they want to be around you. They want to work with you. You stop being just another business person and become a connector, a catalyst. That's when opportunities start showing up without you chasing them. Now, I can hear some of you thinking, but I'm still figuring out my own finances. Shouldn't I wait? No. Start now. Teach what you know today, and you'll know more tomorrow. Share your mistakes as much as your successes. People often learn more from your failures than from your wins. Jim summed it up best when he said, "The walls of your house can only hold so much treasure, but the minds you influence have no limit." And here's the ultimate irony. When you focus on teaching, sharing, and leaving a legacy, your own wealth tends to grow faster. People remember you. They recommend you. They bring you into opportunities because they trust you. Your generosity becomes a magnet for abundance. So, as we close this journey through the 5 rules that made Jim Rohn wealthy, remember, the goal isn't just to live well. It's to leave the world richer, not just in money, but in wisdom. Earn it, protect it, grow it, enjoy it, and then pass it on. And if you've made it this far in the video, it means you care about your financial future more than the average person. So do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because if we start passing this knowledge around, who knows, you might just be the reason someone else's life changes forever. So here we are. 5 simple rules. 5 pillars that turned Jim Rohn from a broke farm boy into one of the most influential financial minds of the last century. And the crazy part? Not one of these rules is locked behind some secret millionaires club. You could start living them today. But here's the truth. Most people won't. Most will nod their head, say that makes sense, and then go right back to old habits. Not because they don't care, but because they don't decide. The difference between those who change their life and those who don't is rarely knowledge. It's action. So my challenge to you is this. Pick one of these rules, just one, and make it non-negotiable starting today. Maybe it's finally tracking every dollar. Maybe it's investing a set amount every month, no matter what. Maybe it's teaching your kids about money before the world teaches them bad habits. Whatever it is, commit. Because commitment, repeated daily, is how ordinary lives turn extraordinary. Rohn didn't become wealthy overnight. He became wealthy because he kept showing up for these principles day after day, year after year. And here's something worth thinking about. Wealth doesn't just show up one day like a winning lottery ticket. It accumulates, like drops of water filling a bucket, slow at first, then suddenly overflowing. But the bucket only fills if you start. If you've stayed with me until now, that tells me you're not here for quick tips and motivational fluff. You're here because something in you knows you're capable of more. And I'll tell you this, you are. Not maybe. Not if the economy's good. You are capable right now. So here's what I want you to do next. First, hit that like button. Not just for the algorithm, but as a small act of commitment to your financial future. Second, subscribe, because this is just the start. In the coming weeks, we're going deeper into the mindsets, tools, and strategies that build lasting wealth. And third, share this video with one person you care about. Imagine what would happen if they took even one of these rules seriously. That ripple effect could be enormous. Rohn left us with a quote that has been burned into my brain ever since I first heard it. Success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines, practiced every day. If you remember nothing else from today, remember that the path is clear. The rules are in your hands. The next move is yours.